There are those who do not believe that climate change is real, but we have been seeing over the last few years that it is a real thing. We were sent major messages with devastating storms and uncontrollable fires last year. Many are expecting more of that this year. Those are all signs of climate change. The polar caps are getting smaller and smaller, the ice caps shrinking. That's a sign that something is happening. It can't possibly be a hoax. The UN is saying that this year is the make or break year for dealing with climate change. Our friends at the Ministry of Planning and Development, they are going to be sending the message today that we here in Trinidad and Tobago not only must do our part, but they're also saying that we are doing our part to deal with the issue of climate change and all the other matters impacting Mother Earth. In our first segment, Spotlighting Climate Change, we're very pleased to welcome Kishan Kumarsingh. He is the head of Multilateral Environment Agreements Unit at the Ministry. Also in with us is climate change specialist Sindy Singh. Good morning to you, lady and gent, and welcome to the Morning Brew.
Good morning. Thank you for having
me. And happy Mother Earth Day to both of you.
And to you too, and to your viewing audience.
Kishan Kumarsingh, I want to start off with you. Many people are not convinced that we can do anything about climate change, but we must be concerned about it. Tell us why.
Well, I think it's important to understand that climate change is not a new phenomenon. It has occurred over millennia, quite naturally, but at a rate that would allow natural systems to adapt in a natural way. The issue now is the accelerated rate of climate change caused by human activities, primarily the combustion of fossil fuels for energy, which fuels into the atmosphere greater concentrations of greenhouse gases, which are causing the Earth to warm, and therefore the climate to change as a result, because the climate system is what dissipates the excess Earth's energy. So what we have seen over the past few hundred years, actually since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, is that the buildup of these gases in the atmosphere causing the Earth to warm and therefore the climate to change, and now having devastating effects on all countries, particularly small island developing states. We are seeing changes in the sea level that are affecting coastline. We're seeing increases in ambient temperature, which are affecting biodiversity, agricultural production, water availability, and also all of these will have impacts on human systems. So the globe has come together to address this urgent issue. It's now known as the climate emergency through the latest global instrument called the Paris Agreement that aims to reverse or at least halt this accelerated rate of climate change by aiming to reduce greenhouse gas concentrations so that temperatures in the atmosphere can be stabilized at about 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, which is thought to be a comfortable level to exist naturally and comfortably on Earth. The Paris Agreement aims, therefore, to reach what is called carbon neutrality by the end of the first half of this century. And to do that, countries are now required to decarbonize their economies. That is, move away from industries or fossil fuel intensive activities that cause the emissions towards more sustainable growth using renewable energy, for example, or less polluting technologies. And this is true for every single country in the world, even the most advanced developed country to the least developing country. And therefore, every country has to play its part. And to do this, they have submitted to the UN their commitments called nationally determined contributions on what they intend to do to reduce emissions towards this objective of the Paris Agreement. And this is an incremental increase called ambition. These are the words that are being used. Mitigation ambition, where every country will incrementally and successively increase their targets to reduce emissions so that collectively and globally we can reach the 1.5 degree maximum temperature increase, and even reverse that to normal pre-industrial levels towards the end of the century. So it's not only about the present generation, it's about thinking about future generations, their well-being, and more so preserving the Earth. Climate change will affect every single sector, every natural sector and socioeconomic sector as a result. And therefore, we must strive to address the issue globally, but also locally, because national action towards global benefits is a long recognized approach. And therefore, we are now doing our part, and not only on climate change, but in terms of all environmental issues, to preserve and conserve all the issues, all the biodiversity, waste generation issues, ozone issues that are now attendant and interplay with each other, and affecting the habitability, if I can use that word, of the Earth.
I want to dig a little deeper into the climate change, the Paris Climate Change Agreement. And Sindy Singh, you're the climate change specialist. What exactly are we doing in Trinidad and Tobago to honor our obligations under that agreement? Because we did sign it back in 2018.
Thank you, Jessie, for the question. As you're aware, Trinidad and Tobago ratified the Paris Agreement in February 2018. Back in 1994, we ratified the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So the Paris Agreement is an instrument of the convention which seeks to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous climate change. Nationally, we have submitted, as Mr. Kumarsingh has mentioned, we have submitted our nationally determined contribution in 2018. Actually, it was submitted in 2015 as the intended nationally determined contribution. Upon ratification, it became our NDC as we know it to be, and it aims to achieve a reduction objective in overall emissions from the three main emitting sectors, those being power generation, transportation, and industry, by 15% by 2030 from a business as usual scenario. In absolute terms, this means a reduction of approximately 103 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. We have also set a target of reducing our emissions from public transportation by 30%, or 1,700,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent compared to 2013 levels by December 31st, 2030. So that is the target we have set. And in order to achieve that target, we have developed an implementation plan to map out the actions which would be undertaken in those three sectors. And congruent with that implementation plan, we have also devised a financial investment plan. We've also designed and operationalized a monitoring, reporting, and verification system for tracking the implementation of these mitigation actions to reduce emissions. And this is operationalized and housed at the Environmental Management Authority. Actions are being undertaken as we speak to implement and get to that reduction target that I stated earlier. So some of these actions include the building of a utility-scale renewable energy project to add approximately 112.5 megawatts of solar power to the grid. And this helps us to move towards that 10% of renewable energy goal by 2021. Negotiations are underway for the project agreement, and other project initiation requirements are already underway. The country is also developing a feed-in tariff policy to allow for the grid integration of small and medium-scale renewable energy installations to allow for people to tie into the grid. We are also working on a project known as the Global Climate Change Alliance Plus project in collaboration with the European Union and United Nations Development Programme to install renewable energy at various public and community centers in rural areas to support and strengthen the renewable energy policy framework and to increase public awareness for renewable energy at the community level and at public level. We are also working as a part of that project to install a solar farm at the Piarco International Airport. We are working on an e-mobility policy as we speak to help the country transition towards the use of electric vehicles. As you are aware, through the CNG program supported by the NGC of Trinidad and Tobago, the country has already embarked on a wide-scale transition towards the use of CNG in public and private vehicles. We're also working on setting up a policy framework to allow for the just transition of the labor force, because you'd be aware that moving away from fossil fuel and carbon-intensive industries will require our workforce to transition to cleaner industries, which would mean reskilling and retooling the labor force. A number of other initiatives have taken place and spearheaded by the Ministry of Planning and Development on behalf of the government. We have conducted vulnerability and risk assessments in all of the sectors for Trinidad and Tobago. These sectors would include agriculture, food security, water resources, human health, coastal resources, human settlements, biodiversity, and even the finance sector. And to this end, we've developed a comprehensive risk management framework, which allows us to help to design and implement adaptation interventions to address the impacts of climate change, spoken about earlier by Mr. Kumarsingh.
Sindy, I just want to stop you for a minute because, sure. Okay, so we have all of these projects that we're doing, particularly the ones that are going to affect transportation here in Trinidad and Tobago. People have been hearing about CNG for a long time. We're starting to see more and more electric vehicles come about. You know, everyone's trying to make that the new thing. The thing is, though, one of the major challenges is how expensive it is to make the change and make the switch. Is the ministry making recommendations for incentives to get people to make that change and make that switch? Even making the switch to renewables like solar energy, that also calls for a substantial investment, whether you are a business or whether you are an ordinary citizen. So I'm not sure whether you or Mr. Kumarsingh would want to address this, but getting people to make the switch, as you put the framework in place, getting them to make the switch, getting them to choose something which will be a little more expensive in the short term, but will definitely pay off in the longer term. What is the ministry doing in that respect?
Maybe I could take that. The policy framework is being put in place and policy recommendations are being made. I just wanted to maybe stress on one aspect, and that is a transition. It's not a switch. Mm-hmm. So it will take some time to get there. So it's not that today we will be using fossil fuel-based electricity and tomorrow we'll be using renewable energy. So that's transition. And the CNG program, CNG is recognized as a transition fuel towards more sustainable transport. Where we want to get to ideally is electric vehicles charged with renewable energy that is absolutely emissions-free. That's the ambition. And contrary to popular opinion, renewable energy, the cost of renewable energy has plummeted over the last few years. And in the US, it's now the cheapest source of electricity generation. So it's not as expensive or prohibitive as seems to be the myth, I would call it. The prices have plummeted, and there are already some fiscal incentives in place right here in Trinidad and Tobago to incentivize the uptake. So, for example, there's a rebate on solar, for example, already stationing a policy basis to, from a policy basis, recommendations will be made.
All right, we seem to be having a technical difficulty there, but basically what Mr. Kumarsingh says is that as we transition to renewables, there will be incentives and being offered by the government to encourage us to take up these new options so that we can do our part to turn back climate change. Sindy, very quickly, these policies that are being put in place after you've done all these risk assessments, they're already being rolled out, or when are they going to be rolled out full scale? Sindy?
Yes, they are already being rolled out. A number of ministries have already used the findings of the risk and vulnerability assessment to implement projects or in the process of designing projects to address the impacts of climate change. So I will speak to one that is being coordinated by Ministry of Planning and Development, having recognized that some areas in Trinidad and Tobago are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of flooding and regularly and routinely are impacted badly by flooding. So we are working on devising a project proposal to access funding through the Adaptation Fund to address flooding in the South Oropouche River Basin. That is ongoing right now, and immediately after this program, we are going out to meet with stakeholders to, present project proposals. So things are being implemented. On the other side of things, we are working with the Eastern Regional Health Authority to build climate resilience into the Togo. So things are happening, and the findings of those studies are feeding into actual projects.
All right. Thank you so much for that update, Sindy Singh, Climate Change Specialist at the Ministry. And also thanks very much to Kishan Kumarsingh, Head of the Multilateral Environmental Agreements Unit at the Ministry. Happy Mother Earth Day to both of you, and have a great day today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.